Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast and YouTube channel, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and you're listening to our Threat Guide series, where we cover your opponent's factions and give you the knowledge to defeat them. The episodes will cover their strengths, their weaknesses, any gotchas they might have, as well as giving you some suggested tactics and counters to defeat them. With all things Kill Team, there are no certainties, so you'll have to take this as a reference and adapt your tactics to you, your team, the terrain, and the mission. Before we begin, I want to give a massive shout out to my patrons. You guys are incredible, and I hugely appreciate the support you give me. If you too are interested in supporting the channel, there's a few ways you can go about doing so. Firstly, you too can become a patron, where you'll get access to the Discord, patron priority questions, early access to content, some exclusive content, as well as tournament rewards. This really is the best way to support the channel, and we try our hardest to support the patrons as much as we can. Secondly, if you find yourself buying Kill Team goodies or hobby supplies, you can use one of our affiliate links. This means that with every purchase you make, a little bit comes to the channel. It'll cost you nothing, but it'll help us keep the show going. We have affiliate links with Element Games in the UK or Noble Knight Games in the US. Finally, you can always support for free without spending a penny. It's as simple as hitting subscribe, liking the video, and sharing amongst your local community. Telling your friends about us is a great way to connect the communities and help elevate everyone's game. We're keen to hear your thoughts and feedback, so don't leave that comment box empty. Let us know what you think. Maybe we missed something, or maybe you have a better strategy. Drop a comment and let us know. Once again, thank you for your support, and with all that said, let's get into it. On this episode of Threat Guide, we're talking about the Warriors of the Depths of Mechanicus. It's the Hunter Clade. This is a team of 10 to 11 operatives, made up of 4 to 5 Sicarians and 5 to 7 Scutari, including the leader. Usually you'll see them with 4 Sicarians and 7 Scutari to give them those 11 activations, which helps them above the mid-range teams. Let's talk firstly about their strengths. This is a flexible and adaptable team. They have a lot of ways to build their team, including the options they can take and the weapons they can take. The Sicarians in particular give you the option between assassins or infiltrators, giving you a different weapon loadout for lethal power weapons and effectively bolt guns with ceaseless, or fully melee with either rending or balanced. They can also choose if they want to use ranger operatives with their heavy weapons and AP, or more likely the vanguard operatives to move up the board, get closer to you, and deal out some more close range damage. This, combined with their Doctrina imperatives, gives them a lot of flexibility during the course of the game. They can effectively choose between more movement, which is very useful in Turning Point 1 to grab objectives, or Turning Point 2 to get unexpected charges off at range, or for better shooting where they get a reroll, thanks to their new buff in the latest balanced data slate, or to give them better defense dice, or to give them better melee. These buffs allow them to flex their playstyle as the game goes on and select the optimum play for them as it's happening. And the fact now they don't have any depreciations on the first time they use it means they really get the maximum benefit as they go through. For archetypes, they have access to both Seek and Destroy and Recon. These are two of some of the best archetypes for tac ops in the game, and they actually have some good faction tac ops to back it up as well. They have access to Ruthless Pursuit, which they can get, is quite useful against elite teams, so if they can get their models within 6 inches of you, they can then effectively get a free VP. But more likely, they're going to be taking Calculated Eradication, which is quite simply just do more damage than your opponent does during a turning point. It's a bit of a mental tax, but actually it works out quite well for them because this team can put out a lot of damage. They're very good at doing a rush mission play. They have access to free mission actions, as well as a free pickup, and they can also forward deploy operatives. This means that they can quite quickly move out of their deployment zone, secure a VP or objectives, and start scoring straight away. The shooting is one of the strengths of this team. They have access to a lot of AP weapons, they hit on 3s, and they have access to rerolls. They can also deny your rerolls, meaning they're quite durable against shooting in return. This means that overall, this team can put out a lot of damage at range and screen you with some effective melee operatives that are actually surprisingly durable going forwards. They also have access to the Surveyor with the Omni specs, which gives them the ability to shoot through smoke or ignore obscuring against a single target. This again is very, very powerful and gives access to shots that you didn't necessarily see coming. The equipment choices for this team are pretty impactful as well. The Servo Skull is one of my favourites, giving them a free mission action for just 2 EP, but they can also have a free pickup action for getting their recover item for 2 EP as well. The uplink vid feed is very, very useful into the dark as it allows them to ignore penalties to their Overwatch, which means that they can be shooting on guard at full ballistic skill. They can also pick up a 4 EP item to generate command points should they need to, although this is generally less common as it stops their comms from handing out APL where they need it. So more commonly, you're going to see the leader taking a refractor field for 3 EP to give a 4 invulnerable save, or on the Rust Stalkers, optimized gate to ignore traverse, climb or drops with the first 2 inches thereof. Enriched rounds can be used with the rest of the EP just to increase the damage output for the radium carbines on their vanguards. So let's talk about their weaknesses. This team unfortunately has access to very little blast. In fact, the only blast it has is on their leader and is 1 inch in range. This is somewhat useful on Into the Dark if you have a clump of enemies near a hatchway, but other than that, it's not going to become very impactful, particularly on open board, and is very easy to play around. It's very hard for this team to achieve multi-kills. There are a few ways of achieving it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's usually trading 1 operative for 1 operative at a time going forwards. Again, they are 10 to 11 operatives, and therefore they're only 10 to 11 activations. They do have an ability to do GA2 to get it down to less than that, but that is what you're expecting. A lot of teams that have shooting armies can outweight this and use their 12 activations to get the last move, and elite teams can cut this down by killing some of the chaff models quite quickly. The melee on this team is actually surprisingly unreliable. They do hit on 3s, but the power weapons only have 4 attacks, and the Rust Stalkers only have 5 attacks with 2 rerolls potentially, but then they're not getting the rending that they need to do to get the damage through. Also, on following turning points, those rerolls are going to reduce, as you can only do that optimization once per game, or spend a CP to make it happen again. This is a team that unfortunately struggles with their APL manipulation. They do have access to those free mission actions, and they do have 1 comms, but that is it. So the majority of this team is just a 2 APL team, and they need that comms to be able to be at the back, boosting their gunners, or potentially trying to get objectives for loot. This means that their ability to stack APL on objectives is actually quite limited. As a player main this team as well, you're going to have to figure out the matchup as to whether you take more Sicarians or more activations and what's more important to you at the time. Additionally, you need to then choose which Sicarians you're actually taking to make sure you have the correct Sicarians. This is quite a large mental tax at the start of the game that 100k players are going to have to play. So let's talk about their gotchas, the things that are going to catch you off guard. The team have the ability to forward deploy an infiltrator. This can be on an objective, but they have to remain on conceal. This is quite useful for them to be able to contest an objective in the midboard and stop you getting an early capture, but also then being able to capture it themselves. This, combined with a free mission action, can potentially mean that they can run forwards and steal one of your objectives that you weren't necessarily expecting. Generically though, you're likely to see that servo skull at the back line to be able to give them the movement potential to move, dash and score a central objective, whilst the forward deploy operative contests and then scores another one somewhere else. They also have the ability to do multiple infiltrates or dashes. If they select the infiltrate option, they can spend a CP, and then 2 rangers can then use that to be able to infiltrate themselves and flip their order during the first turning point. Or, if they did a dash option, they can do the same but with dashes. This means that you can have a surprising amount of firepower waiting on conceal on turning point 1, or forward deploying more models than you're necessarily expecting. Sicarians have various ways to match up their threat ranges. With optimized gate, Rust Stalkers can ignore the first 2 inches for climbs, drops, or traverses during their activation. This can be combined with the ability to have plus 1 inch move to give surprisingly long distance charge ranges. You need to account for this when you see Rust Stalkers on the board, that they could be behind a barricade, but they're going to ignore it and get plus 1 inch, so they're actually going to be charging 9 inches across the board with a 1 inch threat range for a total threat range of 10 inches. That might catch you out. They can also double fight with those Rust Stalkers, so they can move into those areas and then double fight and get you. They're very good for doing hatchway fights, these Rust Stalkers. Because they can get a free fight action as a strategic ploy, they can move across a room, get in range of a hatch, open it, and then do a free fight. This gives them pseudo 3 APL when it comes to killing models, and can give a surprising amount of hatchway fights on ITD. Be aware of this. Additionally, they can do a GA2 from the leader. It has a 3 inch range, but it doesn't have to be the leader themselves, so they could potentially set up 2 Sicarians to be GA2 together and have 2 charging models that go out and kill models going forwards, or potentially 2 gunners to give long range shots at the beginning of turning point 2. This is very, very useful for getting out damage straight away, and is one of their few ways of getting double kills during the course of a turning point. Hunter Clade also have the ability to regain wounds on command. They can spend a CP for motive force vitality and regain D3 wounds on one of their operatives. This is particularly useful if their gunner is on a wounded threshold and then can spend a CP to become unwounded to get unrestricted shooting or movement required to get an angle to shoot, but also on melee operatives who are potentially nearing a break damage point where they need to be able to get 2 hits through in melee but could die to a single hit themselves. They can spend a CP, put themselves over the break point, and then move forwards and do the damage that they need to do. One other thing to remember about this team is their melee models are on 40mm bases, so when it comes to spacing, you need to make sure that you have 3.6 inches as a minimum. That's because the base itself is 1.6 inches and you have a 1 inch engagement range either side of it, and therefore they're going to be able to get in the middle of that, and if you're too close, get both of you. This pairs really well with the Ruststalker ability to fight twice through the strategic ploy Accelerant Agents. That means that they can get in base contact with 2 of you, fight the first model, and then fight the second model. Additionally, because they're 10 wounds base, they're quite likely to be able to parry out and survive but still being doing damage with their 5 attacks. So this also means against elite models, they can charge you, fight, hopefully survive, and then fight again to do the damage they need to finally kill you. You should expect this if you're an elite model, and don't just parry out if you think that you're going to die on the next round of fighting, and instead potentially just do the damage you need to before they kill you. So let's talk about how you best counter Hunter Clade and defeat them. Initially, you need to predict that objective rush. They're going to be having that model forward deployed in the midboard, denying you 1 point if you're a 2 APL team, and they're going to have a model with a servo skull ready to rush forward and grab another objective. Therefore, when playing loot, it's really important that they don't get initiative, as they can steal one objective, potentially contest another, and then steal another objective straight away. This, against a 2 APL team, is really, really painful. So make sure you get on those objectives early and try and capture the ones that you can in the midboard to stop them from taking away the ones that they can't. You also need to be aware of this GA2 multi-kill that they're going to try and set up. Remember, it's linked to their leader and can only activate to models within 3 inches. If you can kill the models that he can GA2 to, or you can kill the leader himself to be able to then deny this. Be aware of it, or space yourself so that you don't get caught out by it. You can also charge block the regular models. They're not very, very good in melee, so therefore if you get in combat with them, you will shut down their shooting. However, do not get caught out and try and charge block the Sicarians, because they are good in melee and they probably will kill you. However, you can try to deny their charges by using their 40mm bases to your advantage. Remember, a base cannot pass over a friendly base or an enemy base unless it has fly, and these guys don't have fly. So clever use of barricades by sitting 1 inch back and optimal spacing between your models so that a 40mm base cannot be placed between them means that you might be able to deny their charge. This is particularly relevant against the Ruststalkers who can only fight in melee. Do be aware they can ignore traverse, so they will be able to get over some areas, but potentially not double traverse. So that means that if they're behind a barricade initially, they can't then ignore the barricade close to you. Therefore, you need to be predicting these optimized gate charges. You need to be aware that they can be adding 1 inch to them and measuring that out at the end of turning point 1 with the expectation of a 10 inch charge on turning point 2. Combine that with the ability for them to ignore the traverse on their barricades, and you should be able to be predicting where they're going to end up and at least making sure they don't get double kills by spacing your models appropriately. You can also APL bully objectives. This is a team that is effectively 2 APL across the board and only one means of APL modification. Therefore, use that to your advantage. If they're playing recon and they have a recover item, move a model onto it early so that you have 2 APL contesting theirs and they then can't take it and run away from it. Or use it on objectives to stop them from being able to loot the objectives and move forwards and use your GA2 to your advantage to contest objectives and stop them getting that early VP score that they're trying to achieve. With this, you should be predicting their tac ops. They're going to be seek and destroy or recon. You know they need to try and get some models into the midboard. It's likely that their recover item is going to be somewhere next to their forward deployed model. So maybe try and set up an ability to get a higher APL model next to that or kill the guy in the middle early on. Additionally, their Vanguard operatives have a wounded aura within 2 inches. Be aware of this and where possible get angles to shoot outside of 2 rather than entering it and giving yourself a penalty to hit instead. If your Hunter Clade opponent has taken the faction tac op 2 calculated eradication, make sure you match your aggression to theirs. See how much damage they're doing and make sure you do a similar amount or greater throughout the course of the turning point. If, however, they're not doing very much damage, there's no point wasting models that you don't need to early on to expose them for shots later to give them their faction tac op. Finally, the standard advice of threat priority remains true. This is a team of key gunners and key melee threats, and if you can prioritise the correct ones at the right time, you'll ensure that you maximise your damage whilst denying theirs, and this should give you the win. That concludes the briefing. What questions do you have? So that brings us to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. You can also share this with your friends so they can benefit as well. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you subscribe to the channel and set the bell icon so you get notifications as soon as the next episode drops. It really is the best way to help a small YouTube channel like ours. If you can't wait and you want early access, you can join our Patreon, where you get exclusive access to all of our content ahead of time, as well as exclusive videos, access to our Discord, patron priority questions, and tournament rewards. If you are an existing patron, let me take this moment once again to say thank you for all your support. It really means the world. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan, this has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next time.